Hi everybody, welcome to Ceramics. Today what I'm going to be doing is showing you how to take a big old chunk of clay. This is how we purchase our clay and how we work from it. Initially here, our clay in the studio, we have a bunch of it that's dried out. So we're going to start out learning the processes of clay by recycling it ourselves. So I found a new game-changing way to recycle the clay without having to pierce holes in and pour water in, and then it's a really extensive basically deteriorating this down to mush and then bringing it back to a workable material. So what we're going to do is we are going to take the dried up big 25-pound cube, when it is moist, the 25 pounds of clay that we purchase, and sometimes they dry out or sometimes they come a little bit too dry. We're going to take it and recycle it so that it's workable. Like right now I can't even tear. This has some moisture to it. I don't have any way to weigh it to know how much it is without water, but it is pretty hard. I wouldn't be able to cut it with my wire tool. I wouldn't be able to work with this at all unless I was going to carve away at it with a carving tool. So I took it out of the bag it was in because that bag had a hole in it, and I'm going to put it in this nice bag that I just recycled and cleaned. We want to have it in plastic. We always store the clay in plastic, just like bread. We want to keep the bread from getting stale. We store our clay in a plastic bag to keep the moisture in. To start, we're going to open up the bags. We're going to check the bag and make sure that there's no holes in it. You will find out very quickly if there are holes in it whenever you pour the water into the bag. You're going to pour about a cup of water. This is not completely full, it's about halfway. You're going to pour it just into the plastic bag. That's going to be the moisture that we want the clay to absorb during this process. We're going to take the bag and we are going to try to squeeze all the air out of it. Okay, the water will help us, so I'm not going to close it up completely, but I'm just going to try to get as much air out as possible. Okay, so I'm gonna slide this over. We're a little bit close. I didn't bring my camera holder today, so here's our bucket. It has, I don't know, maybe about a gallon of water in it. The water will need to go over top of the clay. So I'm gonna take the clay bag, sit it down into the water, and I'm gonna let that water squeeze the air out of the bag. It's gonna push the air out so that bag has no air inside of it. It has that cup of water in it that is going to moisten our clay over time. And now I am just twisting the top of the plastic bag, and I'm gonna kind of make it in a little knot. And the only thing you wanna do is keep the knot above the water level. The water level should be over the top of the block, and I'll show you here in a second. And it is going to moisten up our clay within a couple days. Otherwise, it takes a lot of manual labor. So let me show you what this looks like. Okay, so that is the bucket of clay. I have the knot twisted above water level, but the water level is above the clay. So now what we do is we're gonna let this sit over the weekend until the next class, 4 or 5 days. You can check it if it's in your own studio or at home, but this happens so often to so many people. Sometimes I've bought clay and it came already too hard for me to throw with. So I've had to find this process. And so this seems to work really nicely. When we're hand building with clay, we need the clay to be workable in our hands, rollable, but it cannot be too dry. Because then things will break or come apart. But it also can't be too sticky because it's going to stick to every single surface that it touches. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a nice cube of clay and show you the plasticity that you want your clay to have once we take it out of the bucket, so you know if it's ready or not. So now this clay is going to look like it's a different color. That is because it is. This is a 119 stoneware from Standard Ceramics in Pittsburgh. It is a higher fire clay. This is a low fire clay. Still, the consistency does not make much of a difference between the two of them when you want to work with them. This can be hand building, this can be for wheel throwing, whatever you want to use it for. It's just a lower fire clay, and it is a white. So it looks gray right now, but it'll be white when it's done. So I'm just gonna open up the bag so you can see the cube. This one you can already tell, I can like press my fingers into it. So that's one way to determine with your cube in the bucket if it's ready to come out or not, is by just pushing on it and seeing if it has a little give, okay? The next thing you can do is take a wire cutting tool. Now this one is super mangled because my middle school students take really good care of everything that they use. But what we're going to do is just stretch it out. I sometimes wrap it around my fingers, but you have to be careful you don't hurt your fingers. Stretch it out and just press down and pull through. If that is like going through butter, it's nice. If it's like going through a block of cheese, you can do it, but it's like hurting your fingers, then you probably want to let it in the bucket, submerge some water, or you might need to add a little bit more water to your bag so it can have more water to absorb into the cube. Okay, so that cut out a nice chunk. This is about 2.5 pounds of clay, I would guess, just by handling it. We always want to make sure to close the bag when we are done working with the clay or just cutting out what we need. The more air that gets to this clay, the more likely we are going to have to be to recycle it. So we don't want to have to recycle it. We specifically want to make sure it stays nice and moist. I'm going to slide that aside. I'm going to take this clay. I really can't remember. This is like 100 or 101 from Standard Ceramics. I'm going to take about a pound of clay and I'm going to make a ball. Okay, so I'm just forming this in my hand as if I'm making a snowball. So I'm just smushing it, and it still feels really good. Now you can see my hands. They have a little bit of clay on them, but nothing crazy. So if you pull it out of this, and there is a ton of clay sticking to your hands, even after you work it a little bit, then you're gonna need to take it to a plaster slab or on some canvas and try to get some of the water to absorb out of it into the canvas or the plaster. So you want to kind of take a little bit of water out. And sometimes, unfortunately, we get there where we've over moistened the clay. I did tell you I was going to show you about making a coil and show you the plasticity. Plasticity is how much the clay is able to move and bend, and how much, based on how much water is in it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to roll a coil. So I'm going to take a smaller amount of that clay. I could have used the whole thing, but there's no need for me just to show you this. So I'm going to take a small amount of clay. I'm going to squeeze it into my hand like a hot dog. Okay, so once I have a hot dog form, I'm going to then set it on the surface and I'm going to roll it back and forth. I mostly can use my palms to roll it. I can use my fingers, but the important thing is that you're trying to get it to roll into a consistent size. Now, I'm just testing the plasticity, so I don't really care how nice my coil is. When we're coil building, I'll talk to you about different ways that you can make better coils so that they work nicely for you and you have less work in the cleanup phase. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this around my finger, and you can see that there's not a lot of breakage or crackage. It just bends. Now, that's great plasticity, okay, to work with. Wonderful. If it's sticking to you, again, not a good plastic. It's too sticky to work with. You can't even roll it on the table or form it in your hands without sticking. So you got to dry that out a little bit. If when you roll it, now if I played with this a lot, it would dry up. Okay, so a lot of my middle school and elementary students will play with their clay way too much, and they have a problem with their clay drying out while they're working. I will be purchasing clay from Standard Ceramics that we will wheel throw with, and later in the semester, but we're going to recycle some to get started just to learn the process. So this is just your introductory recycling our clay cube and knowing if the clay is the right consistency or not. So if you have any questions, shoot me an email or leave me a post. Let me know and I can go over that with you. Have a great one.